We both stand for sovereignty and security, demonstrated by our unwavering support for Ukraine under your leadership. With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States. Canada is a reliable, trustworthy, and strong partner of France, which shares our values and lives them through action during this age of economic and geopolitical crises.
We're the most European of non-European countries. It's sort of a weird thing to say. I think I know what he means. I don't think he means that in a racial sense, though I'm sure he'd accuse anyone else of racism if they said that. But look at this. This is a tweet from Ian Bremmer. That's the guy who runs the New York-based lobby group called Eurasia Group. It's where Gerald Butts went when he was exiled from Ottawa for threatening Jody Wilson-Raybould. It's where Mark Carney's wife works. It's basically the de facto campaign team for Mark Carney. So look at that. Mark Carney's campaign advisor, his wife's boss, writes, more Canadians on board for joining the European Union than not. And he shows a poll to that effect from Abacus. And I'm not disputing the poll. But I'm a bit dizzy. Is that being a proud Canadian patriot or not? Is joining the European Union more patriotic than just being Canadian? I'm so confused. I thought that joining a foreign political enterprise was being a traitor. Or is this just all about hating Trump and whatever gets that done the fastest? Here's a tweet from Mark Carney's meeting with Emmanuel Macron of France last year. So, I mean, he really is a VVIP. Of course, he's on the board of the World Economic Forum. Here's what he said. A year ago, he said, it was a pleasure seeing President Macron today. With his leadership, France is attracting unprecedented levels of foreign investment while accelerating the transition to net zero. Looking forward to more work together to create good jobs and build clean prosperity. You know, clean prosperity is code for shutting down oil and gas. Net zero isn't even code at all. It's just a sign of how extreme you are. What serious person would say he's a proud follower of Greta Thunberg, that child actor propagandist? Here's a 2-minute clip, and I want to run all 2 minutes of it, where Mark Carney says he's a follower of Greta Thunberg, and then he goes on to demonstrate how extreme his position really is.
I see myself as part of the social movement. I think those at the vanguard of the social movement might see me as being farther behind, and I've absolutely full credit, and I do in the book to Greta Thunberg, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and who absolutely has catalyzed that movement, the youth movement, and also done something incredibly valuable. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I think we should admit it. And this is often true, by the way, in finance. Very obvious truths are not fully understood in the system. So what she hammered home was the carbon budget, how small it was, how rapidly it was being depleted. And we've moved in a few short years, in part because of her, from a world of ESG, sustainability, broader conversations around, as I say, sustainability, to a relentless focus on net zero. It's called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero for a reason, because we've moved to the relentless logic of having to get emissions down consistent with the carbon budget. So in that regard, I'm part of that and part of mapping what people want to the mechanisms, particularly in finance, in order to deliver it. I'm also, though, conscious that of two other things, Lionel. One is that, of course, net zero it's absolutely essential to stabilize the climate, but that's not the same thing as protecting biodiversity. It's not the same thing as having a just transition along the way. There are lots of other elements that are necessary to this that these broader social movements rightly shine a light on.
Yeah, that's been his focus and his wife's focus for decades. They're not suddenly going to abandon their deepest beliefs. They're just, what's the word? They're just rephrasing them. I mean, here, take a look at this. He says, The consumer carbon tax is not working. It's become too divisive at a time when Canada needs to be united. As my government's first order of business, I have canceled it. And look at that. Just like Donald Trump, there's a little video of him. He signed a document in a lovely leather-bound folder. He's so great. But you know, that's not actually how things work in Canada. I'm not sure if you know that. The word prime minister, that two-word phrase, you know, it's not even in our Constitution Act of 1867. It's just not there. All the executive power in Canada is held by the Governor General, who does, of course, exercise it on the advice of the Prime Minister. It's true. But the Governor General remains our head of state, not Mark Carney. He's not the head of our executive. The U.S. Constitution, the word president is mentioned more than 20 times, gives him the executive power to do things at the stroke of a pen, makes him the commander in chief. That doesn't happen here. Maybe King Charles will give Mark Carney a quick tutorial on just who the boss is. It ain't Mark Carney at a stroke of a pen. Here's a still image of what Carney signed. It just says, I hereby instruct that the fuel charge be removed as of April 1st, 2025, and that the Canada carbon rebate be issued. Who are you even writing to? It's not clear there. You're just writing a little Dear Diary entry. Who are you instructing? Like, is there someone else in the room with us? Are they in the room with us right now? Who? You and what army, as they might say, under what authority? It's all made up. It was a show. It was a trick. It was him trying to be Trumpy. Prime ministers can't do that, though. They can't cancel taxes by writing a little memo to themselves. And I love the part about directing the rebate to be continued as planned. Yeah, you know, I might sign something directing the rebate to continue as planned. It'll have the same effect, that is absolutely nothing. But the regime media, they absolutely love that bit of theater. But back to the man who really does have the power to issue orders by the stroke of a pen, and that is U.S. President Donald J. Trump. So what's going on? I mean, why is Carney looking to Europe? I know it's more fun to talk to people like Emmanuel Macron because he isn't making any demands of Canada. He doesn't care if we have fentanyl labs in Canada. He doesn't care about our illegal migration. He has his own problems. He's not really egging on Canada to spend more on the military either. It's just not what he does. Meeting with Emmanuel Macron is just a fun trip to Paris for any liberal who likes to jet set like Carney clearly does. But Canada-France trade each year, I looked it up, it's about $9.5 billion. Now that might sound like a lot, $9.5 billion, but Canada-US trade is almost exactly 100 times more, $923 billion. If you look at our largest exports to the US, they can't be transferred to Europe. If this is some sort of trade trip or something, it can't work. The top 5 exports we sell to the United States, oil, natural gas, and refined petroleum, are 3 out of those 5. Thanks to the Liberals, we can't really sell that to anyone other than the U.S. because the Liberals blocked any pipelines. Of the 2 remaining top exports, cars are one of them. I don't think we're going to be shipping tens of thousands of cars to Europe anytime soon. And gold, by the way, is the last one. So yeah, Mark Carney has been the Liberal leader for more than a week, and he has not had so much as a phone call with Trump, or as far as we know, anyone in the Trump administration. Now, I think that actually suits Mark Carney just fine. He obviously wants a fight with Trump. It's all he said when he ran for leader in whatever process that was. I mean, fighting against Trump is the only chance Carney has. How else could someone who abandoned us, like Carney did, for greener pastures a decade ago, justify his return to rule over us? How else could someone someone who literally moved the giant company Brookfield? He was chairman of Brookfield Asset Management. He moved it out of Canada into the States just weeks before he ran for the Liberal leader. How could he possibly recover from such a disloyal act? Well, Carney needs a fight with Trump. The noisier and more painful for us, the better. That's the moral hazard. He wins only if Canada loses, only if there's a disruption and trouble with America. Of course, he puts himself and his party first. Now, compare that to Mexico, which, of course, has so many more problems in regards to the U.S. and drugs and the border. That's where, 99% of the immigration problems came from. Now read this in the New York Times, of all places. "You're tough. How Mexico's president won Trump's praise." A scientist and leftist with limited foreign policy experience, Claudia Sheinbaum seems to have connected with President Trump and her calm demeanor and toughness on the border. What? I thought Mexico was the huge problem. Let me read a bit. This is from the New York Times just 3 days ago. This is really new. Ready? I'm just starting in the middle of the story. "Her rapport with the American president is helped in part by the contrast with Mr. Trump's much more contentious relationship with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada, who left the post on Friday. At the start of their most recent conversation last week, Ms. Sheinbaum spent about 5 minutes, this is my favorite part of the story, spent about 5 minutes ticking through everything she had done to secure the border and fight fentanyl trafficking, according to 2 people familiar with the talks. Ahead of the call, she had sent Mr. Trump data to back up her points. She suggested that the tariffs would only make it harder for her to explain this level of cooperation to her citizens. Isn't that interesting? Mr. Trump stayed silent for a long beat after she stopped talking, and then, after complimenting Ms. Sheinbaum, abruptly launched into an attack on Canada, the people said. He asked what Ms. Sheinbaum thought of Mr. Trudeau. She said she didn't talk much with the Canadian leader. Mr. Trump said she was lucky. At the end of the call, the people said Mr. Trump offered to exclude many Mexican goods from tariffs and then started dictating out loud a Truth Social post. Announcing the deal, Ms. Sheinbaum and her team were elated. There's a lot of interesting things in a few words there. Do you think Trudeau could spend 5 full minutes, that's a very long time to talk, showing his command of details about border issues, security, drug interdictions, things that Trump has said he's wanted going back to November? Stopping drugs, stopping illegals, but mainly showing that her attention was on the matter, that she was making it a priority, that she was showing him some respect in return for commercial market access to the U.S. It was in Mexico's interest that she did that, so she did her job. I simply don't think Trudeau or Carney could do what Sheinbaum did, because Canada, to my knowledge, has not done what is necessary on the border yet.